Paulie here on the Latino Slant. It's a special edition talking about the Writers Guild of America's 2023 strike. There's so much misinformation out there, so many ideas, thoughts, and points of view, even some ignorance on my part as well. And I was like, I really want to get clear on this because I feel like when I'm being asked, I want to know fully what I'm talking about and to have a really great opinion on this and what can really change the entertainment industry. So let's bring in some wonderful people that we can talk to about this. You guys know them both so well. Let's first bring on filmmaker, writer, director Kenneth Castillo. Kenneth, you had the film Sideways with Danny Trejo, 7 indie films, feature films. Amazing, brother. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again, brother. Looking forward to chatting about our crazy business.
Ándale, ándale. Well, thanks for being here. And author, filmmaker, Kamran Pasha.
Hola, hermano, and it's such a pleasure and honor to be on here with Kenneth. You know, it's going to be a great conversation today.
Absolutely.
And you know,
Same.
I'm glad you said that because I have been seeing and been a part, unfortunately, of some very ignorant conversations and misleading conversations from bigger YouTuber channels that I just don't appreciate. And I really wanted to like get clear on this, Cameron. And reading your Patreon post, I was just blown away. Blown away. So let's go back. Can we get a little brief history as you had did in your post on why the Writers Guild is even here on the second strike?
Okay. Well, it's a lengthy article. People should come to my Patreon, join it, and it's a very long article. It's got some strong opinions. Not everyone's going to agree with all those opinions, but it certainly presents how I see the history of what's happened and the current event we're in. I think traces back to 2007, 2008, which was the last strike, which I picketed in and marched in. It was the first strike I had experienced professionally. I was a producer, writer, producer on Bionic Woman at NBC at the time, and so I don't know that we can get into everything that I said there, but let me just give very, very brief historical circumstance of what that was. And then a pivotal event that happened in between that and today's strike. So in 2007, 2008, the Writers Guild went on strike for primarily to, there's been a lot of rewriting of history about it as to why we went on strike. But the actual reason, I went back and found the original news articles from the time. I posted them in the Patreon link. The reason that we were striking was at the time we were trying to get better residuals from DVDs, which were the new technology that had sort of started a few years before, by this like early 2000s, right? Late 90s, early 2000s. And it had reached a place where DVDs had become such a major part of how people were watching shows and movies, not just as to watch them live in theaters or on TV screens, they're watching them over. And it had replaced essentially the VCR technology that had been in play for 30 years before. And the issue was that when VCRs had been introduced in 1977, 78, the Writers Guild didn't fully understand how this technology was going to change things and how people were going to start really watching things at home. And so they agreed to a very minimal, what's called a residual, which is a royalty. Every time something is broadcast on television or repeated, you get a royalty, just like, when people, as I don't know, Kenneth, if you've written plays, but playwrights also get royalties when you put up their plays. Novelists, I'm a novelist. Novelists get royalties when people buy their books. And the royalty formula that was established for the VCRs back in the late 70s was very minimal. And then suddenly, over the next 30 years, videotapes became a huge part of our culture. You even made movies called Sex, Lies, and Videotape, right? It became that much of our part of our culture. And so in 2007, the Guild decided it was time to change that formula for how it was going to apply to DVDs and the newly existent Blu-rays. And the other major reason we chose to do it at the time to confront the studios was there was a new phenomenon about to happen, which was called digital downloading. This is before Netflix. This is before Hulu was a phenomenon, before streaming. But people were beginning to say, I think people are going to be able to buy, Star Wars, A New Hope and download it on the internet. And how are we going to get paid? They're watching it. It's a different formula for the money that the studios are making for that. How are we going to get royalties out of that? And
so long story short, from the you had an antiquated system, a deal that's at least 30 years old.
Yes.
That it wasn't happening from the 70s all the way up until the late 2000s.
And new technology had arrived, DVDs, Blu-rays, and then
Just had no idea.
This new thing of digital downloads. The idea of streaming yet wasn't real. It was science fiction still in 2007, right? That you could have Netflix and whatever. Remember, Netflix started off as a competitor to Blockbuster for getting DVDs, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and
in the mail.
They just nixed it too. They just nixed their DVD by mail.
Yeah,
finally, really.
Yeah.
End of an era.
And Redbox has gone. Redbox has gone streaming.
Which is, I may just make a very quick aside. I'm not a huge fan of streaming. I've got a very large collection of DVDs and Blu-rays. I think they are of value. I have a high quality streaming, and yet still I don't like when suddenly in the middle of Luke, I'm your, and then you got the little swirling thing while stop, right?
Quality wise, we've kind of gotten used to it. I think it's because of the convenience of it, right? You don't have to have, but that used to be a pride in your home was your DVD collection.
It still is for me because maybe
same here, but as we got into smaller. I'm with Kamran on that. I prefer DVDs and Blu-ray over streaming in terms of watching, but it's just the convenience of it all. And of course, it's cheaper than cable if you just get the streaming services that you want as opposed to paying for cable. And you can watch things when you want. I mean, it's all convenience, right? How can I get it now? Yeah.
So there was no deal in place for this newfound technology.
Yeah,
barely a deal in for the VCRs, like the VHSs. It was a couple of pennies on the dollar. Is that what you're saying?
No, and what that did, because there wasn't a deal in place, the thing that the streamers offered writers was more creative freedom, because the networks were so rigid in what they were doing or what they were trying to do, which is just copy the next thing. But now you have Netflix going out there saying, what do you got? And you have. And so you had this kind of golden age come out because writers were, I think, creatively free, but they were not getting paid what they were getting paid in the net with the networks. And so that kind of, I think people got complacent and were happy with the quality of television on streamers, but writers were not getting paid and continue to not get paid for that because they protect their numbers. And this is nothing new for independent filmmakers who ever sell a film to a distributor. I'm sure Cameron's heard it many times from distributors. I have as well. The film's not performing as wide or as well as we were hoping. And meanwhile, I'm getting emails from China to Connecticut to Canada to Argentina of people that have seen my films. Yeah. So it's always been a problem in terms of independent filmmakers, in terms of numbers and knowing what those numbers are. That's where the WGA and a lot of writers today have a huge problem because they don't know how things are performing unless it's like Bridgerton or where they know that's a hit, right? And even then, those writers are not getting paid a hit show, what they should be getting paid for a hit show.
So that actually, Kenneth, has allowed us to jump to where we are today, and then that's where I'm going to go back to the middle point, which is where I have the controversial opinion.
Please,
right? So beginning and end, which is kind of, Kenneth, this is how I actually do my screenplays. I plot out the beginning, the end, and then I go back to the middle. So
that's why we love you, Cameron. That's why we love you.
We're doing the story the way it should be. We start off 2007. Now let's go to the modern. Where we are at the current moment, the end, which is where we are, which is the main issue that most writers are concerned about. That most writers, including myself, think is a strike-worthy issue is. How do you continue to have a livable career today in 2023, where the economics of streaming have changed everything? And the primary way they've changed it are in two ways. Kenneth has referred to one, which is now I talked about the royalties residual issues from 15 years ago, right? Now that was when our people are watching DVDs, people are beginning to download things, right? Now suddenly you've got a whole new system where people are. You've got Netflix, you've got Hulu, you've got Disney, you've got Disney Plus, you've got Apple TV Plus, right? You've got people are watching entire streaming channels with a vast library of things. So like my show Sleeper Cell can be uploaded to Netflix, let's say, and people watch it whenever they want to. They can watch any number of times, right? And Netflix doesn't reveal the numbers as to who's watching it, when are they watching it. They're like, that's proprietary information, right? And so partly because they have a mythos they've created, like that this thing is a hit, Bridgerton's a hit. But let's actually see the numbers. They don't want us to see it to go, well, Bridgerton isn't a hit in the sense that, 100 million people watch the first 5 minutes and then shut it off, right? Because we don't know, we can't confirm that, right? So because they won't let us see the numbers because they're afraid people will start analyzing, is that one really a hit? Okay, that one's a hit, but did Wednesday do as well as you're claiming? So they don't want to give us the numbers, and so without the numbers, because at least we knew how many VCR tapes were being sold, we knew how many DVDs were being sold, right? We could figure that out, so we could create a formula around that. But now you've got this opaque thing where we don't. How many people are actually watching Andor? We don't know. And we've got some estimates, right? We don't know, right? Disney won't give us that. It's not in their interest to give us that. And so that one issue, which Kenneth is writing, which is the royalties. How do you calculate them in this current environment, right? I mean, you don't know it because I'll give you information. And the second issue is what the streamers also did was they changed the physical structure of writers' rooms in Hollywood. Previously, when you 1960s and 70s and 80s, you worked on NBC, ABC, you got a 22 episode series, you got hired on a show, you were pretty much working full year round, right? And as your significant other is an actress. If you got a regular on a show, you're working for a lot of episodes that season, right? And that's consistent income that can get you through the year easily, right? With some savings. That went down from 22, it went down to 13 episodes when the cable networks, FX and others started rising, right? Showtime, others. Then from there, as you had Netflix started doing Marco Polo and these shows, it went down to 10 episodes. Nowadays, the current project I'm on, which is on hold because of the strike, the network said we're looking at probably an 8-episode order when this thing is ready to go, right? And so now it's down to 8 episodes. That's become the norm. From 22 episodes, which was a full year's worth of work, to 8 episodes, sometimes even 6, like on Disney on some of the Star Wars shows, 6 episodes. So what's happening now is that writers are getting employed. You work your ass off and compete with everybody to get the writing gig. And it's a 3-month job. And then you still got to make it through the next 9 months. And it's the same exact competition it was to get a 22 episode job, right? And so most people can't get 2 or 3 of these jobs a year, which is what you need to actually survive doing this. And again, there's this perception writers are spoiled brats and rich people. There are a few rich writers, right? But Kenneth, most of us are struggling people with gig to gig, work to work. You got this project. You may have done well this year. I had a friend of mine who, independent filmmaker, made a very successful indie film for a year. He got $500,000 off of direct DVD sales from his website, right? And then he didn't work for 3 years. That $500,000, after taxes and everything else, you got extended for 5 years, right? And so the numbers don't add up the way people think they are. Vast majority of us are not making the kind of money people imagine on a practical level.
No, and that's, I think, part of there's a lack of sympathy for writers, just in the general public, because they have this misconception. Look, I've made 7 independent films, and all of them gotten distributed, but people think I'm living in the Hollywood Hills. I'm like, no, it's independent filmmaking. So they don't have that awareness in terms of it, but my biggest question is like, what, and I have a little bit of an answer, I think, and you touched on it a lot in your post on your Patreon, but that I love the solidarity that we see during all of this during this strike. The problem is, within our business, people who speak out do not get rewarded for that. The solidarity needs to come in the room. It needs to come behind the scenes. It's got
to come from an honest place as well. You got to be unified on an honest argument.
But I'm sure you've been there, Kamran, and I've been there where I've put my neck on the line and stuck up for people, only to have those people then cower. Because nobody wants to lose their job. When you have a job, no matter how bad it is or how shitty it pays in Hollywood, if you have a job in Hollywood, you're doing your damnedest just to try to keep it. So the solidarity needs to happen in the room when someone actually stands up for themselves and says, no, I'm not going to do another rewrite for free. You know what I'm saying? And then what ends up happening when someone does that? You know what the producer does? He goes, okay, you're not going to do it. Then I'm going to have this writer that's sitting right next to you do it. And what does that writer do? Yeah. And what does that writer do? They take it. It's the same with actors, and the problem is that the unions, the writing union, the Writers Guild and SAG are not feared by the executives and the streamers. They're not feared and they're not respected like they fear and respect the Teamsters, like they fear and respect laborers.
Or like the WGA, they respect the Directors Guild.
Oh, absolutely. The last time the Directors Guild struck was 1983. That's
like
you know what I mean? Absolutely. So there's a lack of value that they have for actors and writers. And I put them together because it's one, like I said, it's one of those things where I feel like with producers and executives, they're like, are you going to do this? No. Okay, well, I'll get the 50 other people behind you that will do it. That's where the solidarity needs to come in. When people say as a collective behind the scenes, I'm going to support us not being treated this way when it matters most. But there seems to be a comfort level in getting together for a strike. The thing that I'm looking for in this strike is how many of the big boys, the ones that are very successful showrunners, how many of them are on the lines? Or are they like like you said in your post, the dirty 30, they're behind the scenes trying to make things work, undermining the WGA because they may seem like they have a lot more to lose because they have huge deals, but the thing is they can afford a strike. The people who have the most to lose are the blue collar working writers that don't have those deals. They have the most to lose, and I feel like they have the least amount of say right now because there are probably things going on behind the scenes with the more successful showrunners and writers where they're able to just kind of like, okay, I'm gonna let them strike and I'm gonna be doing this over here to try to get this thing ended so that I can get my show on the air.
So that leads me to at least a controversial point I'm going to make about the issues. I said, look, I'm a WGA member. I've been a WGA member for 22 years. I've struck, right? I voted. I said my piece often when I'm in the minority and then later proved right. I'm used to that. So an issue that I've said publicly and I'll continue to say publicly, it's an issue that a lot of writers are saying privately, but they won't say publicly out of fear. I don't care. I'm a veteran in this. You ain't going to get rid of me, right? And so the issue that I have is I fully understand when our leadership in the guild has to do horse trading and various strategies, putting this proposal that they think is probably not going to go, but they hope to trade it out for something else. The danger becomes when you start making proposals that are not workable on their face, because then what you do is you create a situation where your counterparty starts saying, well, these aren't serious people. And the issue that I'm going to say is controversial, and people on this panel and in the comments may disagree with me on this, but I'm telling you, privately, writers are having these conversations and they're very frustrated. The issue that I knew was going to be a problem 4 months ago when the leadership of the Writers Guild started talking about these things. I got no problem with fighting for better royalties. I got no problem for fighting for longer rooms, which is called span. Like how long are you going to be employed? Are you going to, when you sign up for a show, are you going to be there for 3 months? Are they going to keep you on till post-production, which is 6 months or 9 months? I got no problem fighting for that. Those are practical things that we need to fight for that are going to change people's lives. But along with that, our leadership has been pushing something that I think is personally insane, which is this proposal that they are continuing to fight for it. This proposal that every TV show has to have a minimum number of writers, even if it's not necessary on the show. So the current proposal, which I'm sure is a negotiation tactic, but the example of the proposal is for an 8-episode show, which is what we're talking about right now. They're demanding you have to have 6 or 7 writers. I've worked on small order shows. You have 3 or 4 writers, and that's and the showrunner is doing 2 or 3 episodes because they have to, because they're trying to practically run this thing and keep it under their vision. You don't generally need 6 or 7 writers, and so and people.
But also, how would that affect people like a Taylor Sheridan or a Mike White? Mike White comes from the independent film world. Sure. He writes and directs every single episode of White Lotus.
Correct.
He's not. Is he now going to be?
And what are you going to tell that guy? You got to have 7 episodes.
Well, that's always been the problem with any creative guild is how do you have structure, and how do you have guaranteed work? I came into this business eyes wide open. I've always had a foot in bartending just in case I needed it. And I never came in thinking I was going to be the next anything. I knew that I was going to be a blue collar journeyman filmmaker, and I was just going to try to keep doing what I'm doing for as long as I can do.
Because you love it.
Yeah. And I don't know how. That's always been the challenge, I think, is how do you add structure to a creative profession? And that is a thing that producers and executives, they exploit that. They exploit it. It's easy to conquer and divide when people are competing for work. And the thing that bothers me the most is when I see people, particularly writers on panels, are always saying, no, there's enough for everybody. There's enough work for everybody. Well, no, there isn't. We
No,
are,
and there never has been. I
yeah,
mean,
they're like, it's not competitive. I go, it's absolutely competitive. It's the most competitive. I go, and we're not doing anyone favors by saying that. I go, I know everyone wants to be nice and play nice, but the truth is it's very competitive. And my worry of all this is, and I said this to a writer that I know off the record who's, you know, been on several shows during the pandemic when Clubhouse was a thing. And I asked them, how do you think the pandemic is going to affect inclusion and diversity? He thought it's going to set us back. I go, you're the only one that says that. Nobody is saying that out loud. I go, but you're absolutely right. It's going to set us back because now they have
their first job is to get rid of minorities. Whenever
Exactly.
there's a problem, the first job is get rid of the minorities. We don't have time for this.
Exactly. So my concern is how much further is this going to put us back? I'm not saying, like, I support the strike, and like you said, I think they should get, you know, in terms of how long the shows are running now, that could be extended. But you know,
Absolutely.
they're always going to find that. Seems to me that regardless of what the deal is, these types of companies, these streamers, the executives, they always find the loopholes, man. That's what they're great at.
They will. And one of the critiques I have with the process. And again, this is a critique. It's a critique the writers have said privately, and I didn't even put in that article, but it's a critique. We should have professional negotiators on the Writers Guild side doing this. This is my fellow writers who are, I mean, speaking about myself, they're nerds. I have a JD, I have a law degree and an MBA, and I don't think I'm competent to run a negotiation. That's why I have a very top and determined attorney that's been with me for 22 years that you know will tell me, you know, this is where this is leading to. You know, every one of the people that are leading the negotiation in the Writers Guild are people that have private attorneys that negotiate their deals. They don't feel competent to do it, right? But the system we've structured right now is that we've got, you know, 20 odd people as the negotiating committee who are screenwriters who are, you know, trying to game out all kinds of consequences and loopholes and legal stuff. And I have, like I said, I have a law degree and an MBA, and I don't feel competent to see everything. The counterparty that the studios are bringing is Carol Lombardi. She's an attorney. Yeah. The entire studio staff, they don't bring studio executives in to negotiate this. They have their business affairs top people. So we got to be having that. But this is what we got. And as a result, sometimes you don't play out all the scenarios or think it out because you're a creative person and it isn't your job necessarily to see every legal consequence. And that's my concern with certain proposals that are out there, which I think I wouldn't call them the adversary, the counterparty, right? The counterparty has already taken advantage of them and is fighting a PR war right now in the trades, saying, well, this is an unrealistic thing. This is unrealistic. And of course, they're not focusing on the things that are realistic, you know, that we've asked for, including the ones I've mentioned, which is increasing span, which is, fixing the residuals. And also the issue because no one should think I'm here shilling for the AMPTP, the producers. I'm not, the studios. One of the biggest problems is, they're not even trying to negotiate on the issue of AI and, of AI coming in. And that's insane because AI is a destructive thing to the creative process. I don't trust it. And we need to put limitations on how it can be used. Paul, actors, they're going to be saying AI can just create these characters, right? AI we'll have visual AI that's just going to create characters. We don't need human beings anymore. And they're doing that with the storytelling. They're already doing it with visuals. There's some stunning visuals that AI is creating. They're going to start doing. I've even seen some reels where their AI is creating tiny movies. I mean, they're never going to come up with the genius of what Kenneth is doing. Let
me put a pause because I know we're going to talk about best outcome, where it's at, and also to remind me about the Selena writers in the expose in LA Times. I think it was like 2 years ago at this point. You said something about AI.
Yeah.
And what I'm seeing a lot as far as in this community fandom, whether it's Twitter to YouTube videos, is that they want AI. They don't want they want to get rid of all the woke writers, and that AI will improve and make writers will make the material even better. What's your thoughts on that, Cameron and Kenneth?
I don't think. Yeah, I don't think. Look, we've gone. This reminds me of the digital when digital was starting to take place, and you had filmmakers arguing about whether or not something should be film or digital. Now everything's pretty much digital because, and was something lost during that by going all digital? Absolutely. Was something lost going quality wise, going to streaming off of a Blu-ray? Absolutely. So things are going to be lost. And the thing that's great though, and that's a sticking point, I think the WGA should stick with is they know that AI is going to be a factor in the future. And so this isn't something like streaming where the studios can say, well, we're not sure what it's going to do. No, we know where it's going to do and what it's going to do. It's going to
replace all of us, or at least try to.
Yeah, try to. So they need some guarantee that that's not what they're going to do. And I get the studios saying, well, we don't want to limit, what? Well, I get that. But you know what? That's a sticking point that the WGA should not compromise on.
And, I fully agree.
I think they're going to have, and even if they don't, who knows of what loophole the producers find. But here's the thing, though, that doesn't get talked about too. All of these producers and streamers, the thing that can be exploited is the fact that they're all competitors with each other. Not even so much as, like I was saying, it's competitive in terms of writers, but at least there's some solidarity with writers. 98% voted to go on strike. But with the producers, they're all competing with each other. They don't all want the same things.
They have different models,
Absolutely. And so, when they said Netflix was the holdout, I wasn't surprised by that because Netflix is the top guy, right? So
and they have a completely different model from ABC and CBS, right?
Definitely. Yeah. But and that's an interesting thing too, because I'm not seeing a lot of network writers out there. And network, they're still doing 22 episodes a season. They still have like huge writing rooms and writers assistants. The structure of what TV writing is still exists at the network level. And I'm looking for those network showrunners on the picket lines, and I'm not seeing them because nothing has changed for them.
That's a very interesting point.
I think there is a difference between writers who are working in the streaming world, and there's a difference between writers working in the network world. And they both want different things, in my opinion. And this is having talked with people in both, and people who do network, they're like, what are you guys talking about? And they're like, well, we only did 8 episodes and we only had 4 people in our room. You're doing 22 episodes and you have 12 people in your room. There's the difference, and our show is actually more popular than your show, even though it's on network television. So look, man, it's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of things going on. My thing was, I'm of that belief that, the Actors Guild and the SAG and WGA should not be hiring writers and actors to lead their unions. In Cameron's expose that he wrote, he had mentioned, who's the guy that the WGA hired who stepped down 3 weeks ago?
David Young.
Young, yes.
Guy and kind of a bulldog, and I don't know that.
Who you admired at first, Cameron?
I actually admired him. I believed in him. I followed him.
He may have been the wrong. He may have been the wrong person during this time. But I think it was smart of the WGA to at least go outside and find somebody who knows how to deal with these people. And I'm talking about producers and the networks and the studios and the streamers.
But that's what they should have found. We found somebody who knew how to deal with the garment workers, kind of scenario, because the garment leader, right? That's a different culture,
different animal.
It's a different animal. We should have had. I agree with you. Should have had outsider. But again, I'm arguing that we need to be getting A-list labor attorneys. People that work for the Department of Labor for the White House, right? Those should be the people, because Hollywood is closer to how Washington D.C. works.
I was just going to say
New York union system.
I was also going to say, I don't think you would get that level to defend you guys, maybe to defend the studios.
Well, I don't know if you pay them right. I mean, Mr.
You're absolutely right.
A year. You can pay them right.
I'm absolutely with you. Let's take a pause. Latino Slant special report here with director Kenneth Castillo, author filmmaker Kamran Pasha. Gentlemen, it's been a real pleasure just to sit and listen. Really, just to sit and listen, guys. Kenneth Castillo's website and all his information in the video box description. Cameron's Patreon, same thing in the video box description. Amazing. I mean, your Patreon is so prolific to begin with, Cameron. And I keep saying this. Hey, I'm a paying member.
And it's actually worth the $5, $10.
I mean, yeah. I mean, for me, the $5, I'm like, that's not. I mean,
I'm seeing a lot of stuff that that people aren't saying, right? And so,
Yep.
And so I appreciate for plugging it. Thank you.
I'm curious though.
No, man.
I'm curious, Cameron. Do you get pushback from other writers because you are outspoken?
The good thing is most screenwriters aren't actually subscribed to my Patreon, so they don't know what I'm saying, right? And so, but people know. But what's interesting is I've become a little bit of a YouTube personality. I'm coming on a guest of one.
Right, you're everywhere, yeah.
And so some people are watching it, but the fun thing is they're like, "Hey, man, the DMs I've gotten from people that have seen me on channels like this are like, man, I'm glad you said what I didn't have the guts to say, right? It's a negative feedback from it, and I hope.
Okay, well, that's good. That gives me hope, because I've always been outspoken in this industry, and with my own community, the own Latino community, I always get, hey, Ken, you're too outspoken. Nobody's going to want to hire you. And I'm all, they're not hiring me now. I go, so
that's my entire philosophy. I've 22 years into this, I've made my enemies. I've made my enemies. There's people like, I don't want that guy on the list, right?
Right.
I can't change.
But I also, and the other thing I says, my producers only care about what I write. They don't really care about what I say. And if what I write and what I direct makes them money, that's what they care about. Yeah. So I'm not hurting anything in terms of that, and I have people that are in the industry, and I have people that are, what I call blue collar writer directors that are outside of the industry that aren't in any type of pipeline. But I do know my own struggles and my own frustrations in terms of dealing with diversity and inclusion, because it's talked about so much, but I just don't see it. I don't see it.
You've hit the pivotal issue, Kent, because I was teaching a class at Penn State. I just finished up with that, and I organized a diversity panel. Right, I brought a bunch of screenwriters that I've mentored: Native American writer, Asian writer, a Muslim writer. I brought them all together, right? And these were all women that I had mentored to come do this panel, and now they're all very successful. And one of the things that they all share their struggles and their challenges, that this ain't easy, right? And it ain't easy because the issue you're talking about, which is everyone in Hollywood talks. Everyone talks a big game. The more someone talks about DEI and diversity, the more I don't trust them, because I don't just talk, right? And I said this at the panel. I said, I don't like talk. This is how I'm acting. I'm bringing a Native American woman who has struggled for 10 years to get her first break, that I mentored and has her first break on a Netflix show. I flew her out to Pennsylvania to talk to all of you. This is action, right? I don't like talk. I don't, and I'm not interested in it. I just act.
This is what you and I always use Ava DuVernay as an example. I'm like, what did she do? She decided to hire all people of color, women of color directors. All of those directors, a lot of them weren't repped. A lot of them have never directed television. And now they all have careers. And it infuriates me when I see because there are a lot of Latino shows that weren't here 5 years ago.
Yep.
And then I look at who the directors and writers are, and we're not there. Or we're there in a very small.
You have got one person there to be the face of it, right? So
we're one, exactly. And my attitude is
in the cast, whatever. So
exactly. And so I'm of the same thing, and I always use her as an example. And I've stopped short of calling certain shows out, but people, the audience doesn't care who the director writers are behind the scenes. They only care about who's in front of the camera. And that's why a lot of these Latino showrunners whom I've reached out to, whom I've tried to talk to. And I always feel like I'll be the first one through the wall. I'll get bloody, and the person behind me is the one that will get hired. There was one show I did call out, and then they did another show, and there were actually more Latino directors on there. So I feel like I'm perfectly willing to do that. The person that's going to hire me is the one that actually is refreshed by my my outspokenness.
And also they appreciate your talent. Right, because
I would hope so.
Very hard on my mentees. I'm like, you got to be better than everybody else.
My favorite line from Shakespeare is from Coriolanus: "Action is eloquence."
Yeah.
And a guy used a very interesting word. He was talking about how he feels a lot of people online, when it comes to inclusion and diversity, they're performative. And I thought that was such a great word, because it is performative. And that's why I don't really subscribe to a lot of the organizations either, because I feel
whenever we know in Hollywood, whenever anyone has an organization to solve a problem, it's there to create the problem, right? It's like the Time's Up to solve Me Too problems. A bunch of corrupt people covering up Me Too situations. That's and now they've all been exposed and they've all vanished, right? And so after tens of millions of dollars, right? That's how the system works.
So the solidarity, getting back to the WGA and the strike, the solidarity I see is great, but my point is, we need that solidarity in the rooms and with each other in the rooms. We need to be sticking up for ourselves, and we also need to be sticking up for the guy sitting next to us, and we need to back each other's play when it matters most. And that is when in the moment someone is trying to take advantage and you say no, and the guy next to you says, yeah, I'm not either.
And, let me hit this, Cameron. So the expose on Selena, right? The writers that came out and spoke a bit against how, you know, they were paid dirt and this and that, but it came out after the fact, the expose, and you know, and this is an international hit, the Selena series, 2-parter series, right? Was it 2021, and then part 2 was last year, and I know for a fact that they were paying their actors dirt. How do I know? Just put the equation to get to, you know. But here, you know, you guys are saying, you're saying this, Kenneth, that would have been a perfect time for them just to take a stand. When they were in that, whatever that writer's room was, or wherever that, you know, before they wrote down one word, because they said they ended up doing it for Selena, meaning like for her legacy.
Yeah,
and
here's the thing. The power of saying I have several opinions on that. And I remember that article, and I remember being upset by it, because I'm like, saying this after the fact doesn't help, you know. And so I had a conversation with a friend of mine. He's like, well, Ken, what would you have done? I go, well, there's 3 things here. There's a few things. Number one is, the first thing I would have said, if they came to me with a budget that was not worthy of the Selena Legacy, I would have said, you guys spent this much money on the Queen's Gambit costume wardrobe, and Anna Taylor-Joy was not a known name at that time. Why do they get all this money, production value, costume, A-list talent that's in wherever they filmed, right? She's the star, and over a chess. We're talking about chess. No one knew that was going to be a hit. That doesn't say hit right off the bat, but that's what they chose to go with, right? So that's what I would have said. I would have said, you know, look, this is, and I've said no several times to people. You have to be willing to say no sometimes. That's number one. Number two, this is what I look at when I see a show that is underfunded. Okay, and Selena was underfunded. Hentified was underfunded. And Kamran is probably going to understand this more. You know what I look at? The next thing I look at when I see something's underfunded, Paulie? How many executive producers are attached to this?
Yeah.
Because they're all getting paid. And you know how many each of them had? 13. You know how many that were on Queen's Gambit? 5.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what it is. I mean, it's money laundering. Let's just be honest. It's money laundering to your buddies.
Okay, all right. Go ahead. Pause for a second. Pause for a second, because someone listening, watching this, like, what does that mean? What does that mean?
Anybody
so what?
Who
you know, there's people.
Property,
I know.
Anybody who touched that property is getting paid.
I know, no, but explain the equation to a layman.
All right, I'll give you an example.
Sorry.
You know,
thanks, Ken.
Somebody comes to me, you know, saying, I've got this, you know, idea for this, you know, woman in chess in the 1950s or whatever. It was like it's like, well, they have no connections, right? But I'm like, you know what? I could hook you up with my agent, because I think you got a pretty good idea, right? And that's all I did. All I did was hook them up with my agent. My agent ends up representing the project, right? It gets sold. Now they're like, what do you want? Because we don't want you suing us. You somehow set this up. We're part of it, right? What do you want? I'm like, okay, I want an executive producer credit, and I want you to give me $500,000 out of the budget, just because this project wouldn't exist if I hadn't put these 2 people together. And there's an argument for that. The argument is how much you pay that person to make them go away. But often the executive producer list of things on projects is a lot of people that are what we call non-writing producers, who have a variety of inputs that they put into it. Some of it very valuable, some of it not so valuable. And yet a substantial portion of the budget is set aside to these people who are not often in any way involved beyond a very minimal input, right? And that takes away budget from the practical things Kenneth is talking about. I'll hand it back to you, Kenneth. That's, I think, the background.
Fantastic.
No, I mean, that's a great thing. Thanks, and so the longer it takes for a project, like in terms of Hentified, I mean, it was a YouTube channel first. And I think it came out of, you know, that particular creator came out of a lot of diversity programs, Macro, Project Involve, and they all mean well, But you bet your ass that people, whoever touched it at Macro, they're on there as an executive producer, you know. And if you're really trying to help people, you're like, okay, I'm gonna push this along. I don't want anything in return. That's help, in my opinion.
You know,
But
I actually did that once. I actually helped set up an indie film. There was a guy with an indie film script. It was after September 11th. He was dealing with somebody that's being falsely harassed at an airport and leads to a bigger drama, right? And so I brought it to an independent production company that I had a project with, right? I think you guys might be interested. They ended up financing it, putting a director on it, making it, getting it distributed, right? And when the deal actually happened, when they're like, all right, we're actually going to do this project, they came to me and said, what do you want? And they were kind of nervous because they thought I was going to ask for $1 million. And the budget was probably like $1.5 million, right? And I said, you know what? I don't actually want anything on this. Give me a thank you on the thing. And later at the end of the movie, I saw my name thanking, coming by the thank you. But they were stuck.
I've got a handful of thank yous on there as well, because if you're going to be altruistic, then be altruistic. You know what I mean? Like, and so, that's what I always look at, man. When I see something underfunded, and that was the problem with Selena, I think, in Hentified. And the good thing that came out of Hentified was, there were several good things that came out of Hentified, but Annie Gonzalez was one. I've known her work for years. Mm-hmm. She's now, getting more well known. Those writers and directors that worked on that show are working. So sometimes the win is different than 6 seasons, right? It's like, if people are working after a Hentified or after Selena, that's important, and so, and that to me is more important than the longevity of a show. If they weren't working anymore, then that would suck. But all of them got buzz off of it, and all of them became smarter and wiser after it. So there's nothing negative in terms of the experience. That's just going forward. But I'm saying I would have handled things differently. As a producer, I'm always, as a writer director, I'm always fighting with producers in terms of what's important to me. And you have to be willing to you have to, what Ava DuVernay says, you have to follow the white guys. What would they do? And
you have to know what battles to fight. On a project like Selena, which has a limited budget, right? You have to decide, what am I actually going to ask for this if I help set this up? Like I talked about, I knew on this indie film project, it was going to be $1.5 million budget, right? I didn't want to take anything out of that, right? If I helped set up a Star Wars project, you better believe I'm getting $2 million executive producer right out of that. Yeah. You better believe that, because that's the proper context for that. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. There's a context for but there's people that take advantage, especially of projects with minorities, projects that that have been developed independently. There are people that just come in saying, I want mine, right?
And they do it because they know you won't say, they know you won't say no, because they're going to be like, you should just be grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah. And so, and that's, again, we can only change our own moral character. I mean, what can we do? All we can do is try to inspire others. And part of that is always talking from a place of integrity. That's why I'm willing to be critical of my guild and its leadership, and as well as to support it, because I want to at least have the reputation of being a person of integrity, even if people don't agree with everything I say. It's always coming from a place that's not, how am I going to get this from my angle, right?
Right.
Because a lot of people already, I'll show you right now, I'm hearing rumors today, from on Screenwriters Board, top showrunner was saying, talk to a Directors Guild member, and that, these are rumors. I hope they're not true. I wouldn't be surprised if they are true. Saying that the Director Guild's already beginning sort of quiet conversations with the producers, to get what it wants. And, even though it went out in solidarity 2 days ago, or yesterday at the big meeting, right, that, they're already having conversations that would undercut this strike, right? Doesn't surprise me, because that's, people looking out for themselves. But again, that's not a place of integrity, right? You don't come on the stage, at the big thing and proclaim your support for this labor action, and then be quietly having your own angle.
And that's kind of why, when it comes to this business, I'm somewhat skeptical and cynical when it comes to a hive mind mentality. I'm always kind of looking for, what's genuine, what's honest, and I don't get wrapped up in that, and it's not that I'm trying to be negative. I'm just, I know that we live in a business with what's right in front of us isn't always what it is. You have to look under the layers.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure you've experienced that. I've experienced that, and so I just let's ask the hard questions, and let's move forward. I go, it's just not enough. I go, because as the longer and just like in 2007, the longer the strike goes on, the less enthusiastic the crowds are going to get.
Oh,
And
yeah, yeah. That's what people don't realize right now. This is, I mean, I went through it when day one. I was out there, and people were out there 5 a.m. in the morning, and they were honking. There was music. We had stars showing up. We had musicians showing up, and then 30 days later, ain't that many people. 60 days
Right.
later, ain't that many people. That strike went on for 110 days. By 100 days, there was like every studio had like 2 passionate people standing there with a sign when there had been 700, 2 months before.
Right.
That's what I
Yeah, and
So
that's the sad part is they're
let's
going to be people. Go ahead, Paulie. I'm sorry.
yeah, no, I think that's a good place to mark as far as how long can this strike last and what could this mean to the business. Obviously you're talking about the DJ making their own negocio.
Mhm.
Because you were very honest. The longer it's gonna be death for
Well, that's what the studios are hoping. The studios are hoping for that.
Okay.
But hopefully there's some behind scenes. They're going to be groups of people that are trying to make things happen, or hopefully are exploiting the fact that the studios and the streamers don't all want the same things. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
and there is stuff. Look, this is frankly a war. I mean, we're in a war situation, and in a war, you have multiple factions, even within one side, and people are playing each other. They're spies. I mean, this is exactly what this stuff is, right?
yeah,
And we're having all of that. And then there's got to be people like us that I think need to keep standing for why we're in this war, rather than the practical reason, which is the old man is sending young people to die so he can get rich, right? Okay, I know that's your plan, but let's at least try to remember that there's something behind this for the community that we're trying to fight for.
So you said something about the rich are gonna get richer, the poor will get poorer. Unfortunately, that's Hollywood.
And the middle class disappears.
And
I
the
mean, that's
middle
always
class
the history, right?
disappears.
And that's the history of economic
I'll be
cycles.
fading. I'll be fading away.
Well, what I tell my mentees, I tell them,
Mhm.
unfortunately, the direction things are going in is that, and so you've got to be excellent. You've got, you can't be, despite our best efforts to try to create a system where middle class of writers, producers, actors exist. You got to aim for the top. You just got to be excellent, and you got to aim to be the best you can be, because especially if we're minorities, they don't want to give it to us. You got to run like the Bionic Woman or the $6 Million Man to just catch up to these people, because they put you on a different path.
Let's kind of wrap it up. What are your thoughts on how things are going to land and what you hope for, obviously, in regards to moving forward? Because there, like you said, there's some very valid um, things to fight for in this strike, and then there's some I think are just up there, just okay, let's negotiate on these things. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys, and then we'll wrap it up.
Well, why don't you go, Kenneth, and then I'll say.
Yeah, no, what I hope, I really hope that there's more transparency that comes out of this, in terms of it's going to be very hard for writers to negotiate if they don't know what their stuff is making on these streamers. Like, so transparency is number one. As an indie filmmaker, I would appreciate that as well. It's just you there has to be that. There has to be I don't think of a mandatory in terms of is very practical, because every creator is going to want their best people in the room, and that could be 2-3 people. But I think in terms of if a show like Bridgerton, or a show like I don't know, some of these bigger shows, Game of Thrones, it seems to me, I mean, those guys just wrote everything. It was just the two of them, from my understanding.
And after a while, it wasn't a good idea for it to be the two of them.
Just the two of them, exactly.
Yeah, they weren't up to it.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that writers get empowered through this, and that there are some gains. In terms of what's going to happen, man, I have no idea. Things are changing so fast. As an independent filmmaker, over the past 15 years, I've had to adjust constantly, because it's just the business changes constantly. It's never stagnant. It's never the same thing. And I just try to roll with it as best I can. But they're not going to go backwards, and so they need to get the Writers Guild will hopefully negotiate something that will I mean, what they're asking for is fair, and I just hope they get all of it.
Yeah, I mean, all I'm going to add to the brilliant stuff that Kenneth just said is that the way to approach this is something Kenneth said earlier, which is we gotta. There are different factions here in the on the studios. They have different economic models. Netflix's model is not like the network's model. It's not even like the cable network's model. I'm working on a project with a major cable distributor. They have a totally different model. They've got a streaming service, but they got a totally different model than Netflix does. And I think the biggest mistake for us was having Netflix be, because Netflix only joined the AMPTP, the studios group, last year officially, right? I think they should never been part of it because it's a totally different beast. And I don't think they should ever been, because now they're holding things up, and I've heard and I believe it. And I think that and I'm sure our guild leaders, at least Ellen Stutzman, who is the new acting executive director now, Mr. Young has stepped down. I have a lot of respect for her because she's a long-term guild employee. She isn't a politician who's posturing. She's a bureaucrat inside the guild who knows the numbers, been there for 15 years, right? And she's leading this. And she's a smart woman, so I'm sure she's trying to break the different, like, Netflix has its agenda. Well, we don't need to negotiate with you. The rest of you, this will work. Let's give you a system, and then Netflix, when you're ready to talk to us, get back to us, right? Because we're going to make a deal with everybody else. I think that's the only way to end this. I think that we need to, go to every individual buyer and say, what are your needs, right?
Why couldn't the WGA have separate contracts with each streamer?
They can do separate side deals. They've done it.
And I think that's what they should do. I think they should just go to separate streamers and get, and then what that ends up happening is then writers are going to want to go with the streamers, and then Netflix is going to have to negotiate.
Correct. That is a strategy. I think that we're gonna. I think that we're probably going to have to wait a little bit for the Directors Guild to begin its negotiations, which are beginning this month, I believe. Their contract ends next month, and so, I think if the Directors Guild were to strike, which I don't expect they will, but if they were to, I think that would bring this all to a quick resolution. But already 24 hours after the Directors Guild made a big show of solidarity, we're already hearing from top showrunners that they're doing private stuff, willing to throw the WGA under the bus for certain things already within 24 hours. And so I think that, we need to quickly, within a month, get this thing moving towards resolution. I think if we're 3 months into this, I think it's going to be a disaster for everyone. I think 4 or 5 months into this, people will start leaving the guild, and I don't want that outcome, right? But I think if we got to get this done in the next 2 months for this industry to survive in a way that we understand.
Because you said what? There's 200 to leave?
Yeah, I mean, the idea is there's 20,000 people in the Writers Guild. Of them, maybe 2,000 are regular working writers. There may be similar, things in the SAG and amongst actors, and not a lot of them are working right all every day. Sure. And so, and of that 10%, another 10% are the top showrunners that Kenneth is talking about, the top players. So if those people said, "I'm done with it, I'm out. I'm just going to go back. I'm just going to leave the guild, go FICOR. I'm going to get my show back on ABC, do my project at Netflix or Hulu." Then you got 200 of those guys go. The system, the Writers Guild will become completely obsolete in that system because now they're all individually negotiating. And I don't want that outcome. I'm still a member of the guild. There have been times where I've thought that, some of the leaders of the guild I don't agree with. I'm like, should I stay? I've stayed. I'm staying. I want to stay. And I want the guild to work. And that's why I'm hoping that, they get serious. You're gonna start this battle now. You got to win this battle fast. It's that whole, well, what did they say? And that the Powell, the Colin Powell, doctrine or whatever, and just go in, win fast, stabilize it. You got to do that.
Let's do this, gentlemen. When this gets resolved, let's come back here and do a debriefing and hopefully celebration, not an epilogue.
Yeah, no, that's
because
for this.
Work begets work. So when you guys are working, our loved ones are working, and there's a lot of fantastic people in this business, trying to make it and creating some wonderful pieces of art as far as film and television.
Absolutely.
Indie film, So again, thank you guys. If you guys are watching this, please check out Kenneth and Cameron's links in the video box description. Gentlemen, thanks a lot. I always say this to everyone, wherever you're at, keep your slant foot.